So now we come to what I think of as one of the most joyous of moments of the joyous weekend, and that is to award the Award of Merit. The Award of Merit is the highest award that our executive committee, which represents all of our alumni, gives. And we have 3 just marvelous recipients coming here today. And so I'll first start with Judge Jose Cabranes. As Harold Coe once said, not for a second has Jose forgotten where he comes from. I mean, Jose, I just want to say, Judge, I was properly brought up by my judge, and I'm used to calling judges judges, but if you'll be forgiving. We at Law School count ourselves to be very lucky to have been part of Jose's journey, and he has not for a second forgotten us. Jose was born in Puerto Rico. When he was 5, he moved to the South Bronx. He spoke no English at the time, but that didn't slow him down. He attended New York City public schools and then Columbia College, and then, of course, Yale Law School. Jose served with enormous distinction as the very first general counsel of Yale University, and I was quite charmed by the exit memo that he wrote about hiring his replacement. He suggested it would be useful to find someone who would be, quote, amused by the creative eccentricities of our institution and perhaps even has a fondness for them. And he noted, too, that law professors were generally not good candidates. Again, I quote, "I can think of no more dubious model than a law teacher who has had no practical experience in the mundane practice of law." I have no idea what he's talking about. In 1979, President Jimmy Carter nominated Jose to the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, making him the first Puerto Rican to serve as a federal judge in the United States. And Jose made certain he wouldn't be the last. You might be familiar with one of his research assistants, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who still looks up to the judge as a mentor and trailblazer. When during an interview about her time here at Yale, 3 of her friends remarked at the law school when the interviewers asked them, it was a tough place to be, I think, at that point when you were Latino students, and 3 of them asked whether anyone at Yale had made students feel welcome. And all 3 of them quickly answered, Jose. All that fierce love extends to his enormous family of clerks who adore him and often describe him as the best and most relentless editor that they've ever had. In 1994, President Bill Clinton nominated Jose to the Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. He was admired on both sides of the aisle, both then and now. When asked if the nominee was a liberal or conservative, Senator Dodd responded simply, Jose Cabranes is a judge. Jose has more than lived up to that high honor, bringing his incisive intelligence and his keen, lawyerly eye to every opinion he writes. Jose is also more than a judge. He's made a point of supporting kids like his younger self and help them dream big dreams. He helped prepare inner-city Hispanic youth for college through a New York nonprofit called Aspira, and he helped found the Puerto Rican Legal Defense Fund. On the bench, he still speaks to Spanish-speaking defendants in their and his native language. He coins his own phrases, Cabranesisms, that those around him can't help but adopt. He's known to sprinkle Yiddish into casual conversations. He is the loving father of 4 children and a devoted husband to our beloved Kate Stith. Jose is a great American, that's another Cabranesism, and he is a consummate mensch. So please join me in celebrating the remarkable Judge Cabranes.
It is an honor to share a podium with Randy Kennedy, a great scholar and a mentor of my daughter, Jennifer, and with Danny Parker, my friend and colleague on the circuit that is second in name only. I arrived here in 1961 as a member of the silent generation, Although we arrived in the first year of JFK with all its promise of youthful change, we had come of age in the Eisenhower years, and the silent generation was named, by Time magazine, of course, because of our supposed conformism. Our alleged conformism was in contrast to the anti-establishment baby boomers who came behind us and who came to define what we now think of as the 60s, which didn't really begin until the late 60s. In the Yale Law School of 1961, the unmarried men lived in the wonderful Sterling Law buildings in fabulous suites with working stone fireplaces. And the unmarried women, they were few in number and invariably brilliant. The women resided in the modern Helen Hadley Hall on Temple Street, which, frankly, did not begin to compare. For most of us new arrivals, the law curriculum was esoteric, if not opaque. It did not help that on our first day of classes, the first case we encountered began as follows: a sumsit for a cow. But we slowly caught on. It helped that we were required to take our meals in the law school dining room, which became the center of our lives. With linen tablecloths and a maitre d' named Max, a Swiss-German maitre d', the whole scene elevated us literally and figuratively. It strengthened our ties, and it stimulated conversations at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, often about the classes that we encountered together. Throughout my years as a student here, all but one of our professors were men, the exception being the great Ellen Ash Peters, whose memorial celebration occurred in this very court auditorium just 2 weeks ago. These teachers had high standards, sartorial as well as academic. They all dressed as you might expect of luminaries, except, of course, for the egregious Fred Rodell, who deliberately dressed down, way down. Allow me to mention two professors whom I personally especially admired for their range and for their personal kindness. I refer to Boris Bitker and Myers McDougall. I was struck by the fact that the list of former honorands indicates that they received this award together, quite appropriately. Each was a sterling professor in an era before that title mysteriously metastasized. Their origins and their subjects were far apart, but they were close friends and colleagues. Bitker was indisputably our country's leading tax authority. He was so great a teacher that even I overcame a dread of the subject matter. Bitker also offered a course of his own devising on church and state, specialist in taxation and church and state. Very much a Yale Law School phenomenon. He fostered student interest in a field not yet born, environmental law. McDougall was the preeminent American international law professor of his generation and sponsored the very first courses ever taught on the international protection of human rights. Mac, as he was known, was tolerant and kind even to those of us who never fully understood his famously theoretical jurisprudence. There were those of us who said that he was bilingual. He spoke and wrote in English, and then he also did McDougallese. Mac also ran the graduate program as a sort of academic foreign office to which he attracted students from all over the globe. The graduate students would return home to Asia, Latin America, and Africa with their law degrees, and they would emerge as distinguished lawyers, foreign ministers, prime ministers, and presidents, which was pretty much what Mac had in mind. Though we entered the law school as the silent generation, The winds of change were blowing. Fortified by the self-confidence of our education at Yale, many of us would work in the nascent civil rights movement. My summer job in 1963 was at the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, the first and only civil rights agency in the federal government at that time, which was directed almost completely by alumni of Yale Law School. And we all admired the path-breaking civil rights enforcement efforts of the U.S. Department of Justice, also led by Yale Law School alumni. A pivotal experience was being part of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, which had been convened by the great patriarch of the civil rights movement, A. Philip Randolph, and at which, of course, the greatest speech in the century was given. In sum, Yale Law School did not just prepare us as lawyers. In classes and by example and by osmosis, it instilled in us a sense of duty to meet the challenges of our rapidly changing country and the world beyond. In sum, in the early 1960s, the Yale Law School was already the best place to go to law school. And I'm happy to say it still is.
Our next award goes to Randall Kennedy, more affectionately known as Randy, a graduate of Princeton, a Rhodes Scholar, and a member of the class of 1982. Randy, upon graduating from Yale, clerked for the great Judge Skelly Wright on the D.C. Circuit and then for Thurgood Marshall. Just 2 years after his law school graduation, he joined the faculty of Harvard Law School, where he serves as Michael R. Kennedy Professor of Law and was once my colleague. Randy is an iconoclast. He is a scholar's scholar who has written an enormous range of impactful scholarship that shatters bromides and upends fields. In the words of Justin Driver, one of our own iconoclasts, quote, "He is not merely the most prominent scholar in his field, but the most broad-gauged, the most independent-minded, and not coincidentally, the most thought-provoking." Randy displays a rare mix of intellectual courage and deep humility. He isn't afraid to make bold claims, but he isn't afraid to change his mind either. Randy speaks up, even when he knows what he says will be unpopular. His nuanced views defy categorization and challenge us to rethink our assumptions. He's been called an impartial intellectual, as ready to criticize as commend, and uncompromisingly disinclined to partisanship over reflection. Randy, in short, follows the truth wherever it takes him, and he proclaims the truth loudly, even if it isn't what we want to hear. Now, despite his fame as a scholar, Randy really sees the people around him. When asked about his favorite part of a recent book, Randy said, "The acknowledgments," because in those pages, he thanks every single member of the Harvard Library staff who helped him write the book. Randy expects all of his students to engage with controversial, divisive issues with all the friction that can engender. But he sits with them, genuinely sits with them during those hard moments, and they love him all the more for it. Randy's approach to intellectual discourse is a model of academic integrity. He demonstrates the courage to engage in frank debates that sometimes lead him to reconsider his own views. He's not afraid to express the limits of his understanding or the evolutions of his thought on complex matters. He never mischaracterizes or caricatures his opponent's arguments. Instead, he states them in their most powerful form with enormous respect and care. This combination of intellectual honesty, humility, and openness to change is rare, and it is one of the reasons that Randy has produced such important work over the course of his career. His approach serves as a powerful example of how scholars can pursue truth without the burden of false certainty, what it truly means to be a scholar with an open heart. Please join me in celebrating the great Randy Kennedy.
association with Yale Law School has been one of the great privileges and enrichments of my life. We are part of a remarkable institution, a great institution, an institution that has been served extremely well by its leadership. We have seen and heard our leadership. These past few years have been really difficult for all sorts of reasons for people who are administrators of our institutions of higher education. It's really mind-boggling to think of how difficult it has been to be the dean of a law school over these past several years. Heather, thanks so much for your guardianship of our beloved institution. Thank you for that. When I was in school here between 1979 and 1982, I really did not envision how important Yale Law School would be to me in the subsequent decades. It has been deeply important in all sorts of ways. I'm going to mention two professors who, over the decades, have been essential to my development. One is a person that I met here. He was my teacher in a number of courses. Person I have in mind is Owen Fiss. For 40 years now, I have been debating with Owen Fiss. Sometimes it was in person. Sometimes it was in print. Often it was in my imagination. It has been quite formative. Last year, New York University asked me and another alumnus of Yale Law School, Sam Zakharoff, to participate in a discussion. It was a public discussion. And it was all about how people with different views can trade views, they can debate, they can contest their views, but they can do it in a civil, productive way. That was the whole point of this session. And there came a point in our talk in which we both reflected on how much Owen Fiss had meant to both of us. I want to mention another professor. I met him actually as a student. He was a student in another institution. One of the great privileges of being a legal academic is you teach students and then you get to see them blossom. I've seen wonderful students become partners in law firms or leaders in business. The person I have in mind has become a leader in legal academia, is a stalwart on this law faculty, Justin Driver. Now, I knew Justin Driver as a student. Now I know him as a colleague. And actually, we've traded places. We've traded places. Because I view myself as a student of Justin Driver. There is no serious written work that I hand in to a law review or to a publisher that I make sure that he takes a look at it. I've been the beneficiary of his encouragement, the beneficiary of his criticism. He too is part of why Yale Law School, over 40 years, indeed right now, has made such a positive difference in my life. I'm very happy to acknowledge that, to champion that, to express my thanks for that. This award is deeply meaningful to me. I will always prize it. Thank you.
Our final recipient this morning is also a judge of the Second Circuit only in name, Judge Barrington Parker, more affectionately known as Danny, who currently serves in the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. He has spent 24 years before he became a judge doing commercial litigation. He was appointed by the Southern District of New York by President Bill Clinton, a New Yorker through and through. When he was told his chambers would be not in New York City, but in a suburb, White Plains, he went, and I quote, kicking and screaming. During his tenure as a district judge, he presided over between 40 and 50 jury trials, handling a wide array of complex and high-profile cases. In 2001, in a testament to his reputation for fairness and legal expertise, Judge Parker was elevated to the Second Circuit of the Court of Appeals by President George Bush. So just think of that for a moment. In these days, not only was Danny nominated by presidents from two different political parties, but he was confirmed unanimously in each instance. He was sworn in to be a judge in the Second Circuit in this very auditorium. And Danny is a Yalie through and through. His journey on this campus began in 1961 as an undergraduate, where he majored in history and immersed himself in the civil rights movement. Inspired by the activism taking place at Yale Law School, he later returned here for his LLB. His education didn't just shape how he approaches legal problems, but in his words, quote, how I think and approach life. Danny's dedication to Yale has been unwavering, as evidenced by his 12-year as a fellow of the Yale Corporation and his service as a trustee of the Yale New Haven Hospital. Judge Parker, like his peers today, also sees the human beings around him. He is a beloved mentor, not just to his clerks, but to an enormous number of students in this school. He always reminds them that there is more to every human being when he speaks with his clerks. There's more to every human being who enters his courtroom than the worst thing that person has done. Danny's approach to jurisprudence reflects the best values of our profession, a commitment to rigorous inquiry and openness to different viewpoints. He has grappled with some of the most pressing legal issues of our time. His jurisprudence reflects a nuanced understanding of constitutional principles and a steadfast commitment to upholding rights. From matters of life and death and capital punishment cases to intricate questions of employment discrimination and affirmative action, the judge has shown a remarkable ability to navigate these sensitive and often controversial topics with clarity and fairness. What sets him apart is not just his legal acumen, but his courage in bridging divides. For his service to the law school and to our beloved Danny, please join me in recognizing Judge Parker.
Good morning, Dean Gerken, classmates, members of the law school community, and dear friends. I am deeply honored by this award. I extend my heartfelt thanks to the law school community for giving it to me. I also profoundly thank all of those who have shaped my life over these many decades and who have guided me to this point in time. Most particularly, I thank dearest Anne. How did I get here? When I started my journey in Washington, D.C., Plessy versus Ferguson was the law of the land. I recall my hometown's segregated schools and restaurants and workplaces. But I also recall a segregated community in which everyone counted. Community where we looked out for each other and were collectively committed to do as much as we could for as many as we could. And this was a community which confronted obstacles and problems and slowly but surely helped this nation turn a page and brought us to a different place. My memory of the people who I knew growing up in Washington who were responsible for these achievements will stay with me forever. A dear family friend, Wiley Branton, represented the students who desegregated Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. George E.C. Hayes was a dear friend of my grandfather. He won in the Supreme Court Bowling versus Sharp, which desegregated the schools in Washington, D.C. Family friends, Spotswood Robinson, Oliver Hill, and Robert Carter litigated the Prince Edward County school case. As you recall, rather than desegregate, Prince Edward County closed its schools. Those three great lawyers litigated that case for 11 years and ultimately convinced the Supreme Court not only to require the county to open its schools, but required the state to fund it. Now, you would have to ask yourself whether this result would have been possible in a court that was devoted to originalism. Over the course of the years, there were victories and there were defeats. But these folks who have now slipped out of focus and into history kept, as they say, their hands on the plow. But as we grew up and watched all of this, we're expected not to forget two things. The first was that one person could make a difference. And the second was that from those to whom much is given, much is expected. These things were occasionally specifically expressed to us, but more often than not, they went unsaid. But we all knew them. Decades later, I found myself at Yale and at Yale Law School. Hardly a day goes by when I don't ask myself, how did all of this good fortune come my way? And at the top of my list of things I'm grateful for, I place the time I spent in this great institution. Maybe I'm spoiled, maybe it's a lack of imagination, but for the life of me, I simply cannot understand how anyone could have feelings other than of profound gratitude for the opportunity to study here. My enduring memories of Yale Law School are the conversations in the hallway. One classmate smarter than the next, one classmate more interesting and accomplished than the next. I was surrounded here at this school by people who knew what I had learned early on, that one person can make a difference, and that from those to whom much is given, much is expected. And again, here at Yale, nobody actually ever said these things, but somehow the law school community well understood their importance. Why? Because these responsibilities are in the DNA of this school, in the water supply. And so I left here 55 years ago with dear friends, many of whom I remain close to. My classmates and my Yale Law School friends have made contributions, large and small, year in and year out, to their communities, to the law, and to this nation. I see many of you in the audience today. Thank you for all you have done. How blessed I am to know you and to be among you. In my years of judicial service, I am proud to say that Yale Law School has been beside me the entire time. Ralph Winter taught me evidence. Guido Calabrese taught me torts. John Newman presided at my very first barristers union trial, second year. They became colleagues on the bench, and they also became my dear friends. No circuit has as close a relationship with a law school as the Second Circuit has with Yale Law School. 9 of my circuit colleagues matriculated here, and 22 of the district judges in our circuit have Yale Law School degrees. The judges on our circuit came to it from different directions. Though we sometimes differ, the bonds of collegiality, of friendship, and of mutual respect are ironclad. Jose Cabranes and I have been dear friends for more than 35 years. We talk all the time. Over all that time, I have never heard him utter a mean word about a colleague, even about the 1 or 2 we don't particularly care for. That's how life is on the Second Circuit, on Yale's court. And over all of this time, no one can accuse our court of infusing political partisanship into our decision-making. But again, that's how it is on the Second Circuit, on Yale's court. And so in closing, I again thank the law school, and I thank Dean Heather Gerken for this signal honor. And again, I thank all of you. And finally, at this particular moment in our nation's history, I ask that the good Lord stand beside us and keep this nation safe and free.